A few weeks ago, I made a video on how to adhere tile to alkaline resistant mesh. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to adhere that to a paver. I'm also going to show you how to use thinset as grout, and I'm going to show you that right now. A few weeks ago, I did a tutorial on how to adhere tile to mesh, alkaline resistant mesh. But I've had a few people ask, how do I actually adhere it to a concrete stepping stone, or in this case, this will be a paver. So I thought I would do a small tutorial on how I do it so you can adhere it to a paver or a stepping stone. Now, I've cut down the mesh a little bit around the outside and also in between. It's not really necessary. What you don't want is mesh, right out here. But in this particular case, because this is just a small paver and this happens to work with this particular design, I thought I would use this paver. Now, I have cut it, like I said, I have cut it in between here so you can see it. Not absolutely necessary, but that's just what I did for this particular instance. I have also sealed the paver because it's concrete. I've sealed it with a concrete sealer because concrete is porous. So I want to ensure that there was not going to be any moisture coming from underneath the paver affecting the adhesive. So what I've done is I've prepared it. I'm going to remove that. And I have my thinset here, which is a cement-based adhesive, and I'll put a link in the video just up here showing you how I prepare my thinset and the products that I use. I'm just giving this another stir because I've let it slake. Okay, so I'm just going to put that onto the paver. And it's really messy stuff. Just give it a bit of a spread out. It's like frosting on a cake, really, isn't it? Except this is black. Okay. Okay, so we'll put that aside because we'll use that, what's left. Over there. Now, I have one of these, which are serrated on the edge, and they come in different heights of serration, depending on what material or how deep you want the thinset to be. And this is a notched trowel. I'm pretty sure it's a notched trowel. Well, it says an adhesive spreader combination, but you can get a notched trowel, which is very similar. And all I'm going to do is, and I'm just going to spread a bit more across the outside here, have it flow over the edge a bit. It doesn't really matter. It's got to clean up anyway. And all I'm going to do is just spread it out. And what it does, it creates, rest back in there, it creates the depth of the thinset that you need. So, for instance, this one here, if I use a smaller one, see the grooves are smaller. But I'm actually, and I've made a mess now, I've done that, but I'm actually going to be using the deeper one for this. And it is important to know how deep it's going to be, because what you don't want to do is have the thinset squeeze up between the tiles. But in this particular case, I've made the thinset to be the same colour as what I'm going to grout. So if it squeezes up between the tiles, it's not a major problem. But if you use white thinset and it squeezes up between the tiles and you're going to be grouting in black, then that can be an issue. So in that video that I've put up top there, it links to what I use and how I prepare the thinset to be the same colour as the grout. And I think that's very important because, like I said, you don't really want, I've missed a bit, you don't really want the thinset to be coming up between the grout lines and creating further problems for you when it comes to grouting. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to just get this and I'm going to lay it on, getting it even. Like that. And then I'm going to get my, well, this is actually sandpaper, you put sandpaper on it, but it is really good for pushing down, because if I was to push this down with my finger, you may not get it even because this might push down further, because you want to embed the tile into the thinset, into a bed of thinset, but you don't want to push the tile down and squeeze out all the thinset, and then the tile is actually right onto the concrete. So it wants to sit in the bed of thinset with a little bit squashing up between. So by using this, I can push it firmly down without a problem, and it squeezes into and it pushes into the thinset. And as you can see, it's coming up here in between the things. And then I can then push down here if I wish to, push this a bit further down into the thinset. Squeezing up. Okay. Then you can now apply more tiles to this. For instance, more of the tessera into these areas, or you can apply more thinset in here if you wish to, or you can butter the thinset up to the tile. For instance, in this particular case, I have some here. And if I get that and push that in there, I'm going to take off some of this adhesive from the edge here. And some people panic about using thinset, but you really don't need to, because, we'll get rid of this, because it's quite easy to use. You just don't want to leave it sort of for overnight. If you've got a big blob of thinset, you need to clean it out. So if you wanted to come back to this and you didn't want to put your tessera onto here, you would just scrape off all this spare thinset. But I'm actually going to continue on and use this thinset, the extra thinset that I've mixed up, and then apply the tessera. So if you wanted to, you could use the baggy system, let's say that hasn't been adhered, and you could just put a little bit on and then push it down into it, like that. And then you could go and, for instance, get another piece, put a little bit here onto this area. And if I was doing this, I would normally use the baggy system. Don't worry about the thinset on the surface, because you can wipe that off later. You just don't want to have any big blobs of thinset on the surface, because thinset can wipe off quite okay. It's known, you don't have to go into panic on it, but you just don't want to leave it there for, you know, a couple of days, especially a big blob of it. So what I'm going to do is I will continue this off camera, because I'm sure you don't want to see me do all this. And I'm going to pump that into a baggie and see how it squishes up. It's not an issue, because it's going to be the same colour as the grout. So there's no issue with it coming up between the grout lines. So I can actually keep applying it to here, because there's quite a bit of thinset, or where it might be a bit thinner on the outside, I can add some more thinset. So anyway, we'll come back to this, to see what it's like when it's I've put it all together, and then it'll be ready for grouting. For this piece, I'm going to be using thinset as the grout. Now, most people would use sanded grout, which is also fine for this piece, but I've gone with using thinset. Now, before you start using thinset as a grout, because it is an adhesive, there are a few things you need to know about it first. So check out my video, which I'll put up on the screen now, and that will show you how to use thinset as a grout. Okay, let's get into it. I use my hands, and because I like the squishiness of it. And when I was young, I really did enjoy making mud pies. I've got quite a bit of thinset here, obviously too much, but I prefer to have too much than not enough. Just go over the side there. When I did my first mosaic, I had never grouted, and when I did it, I was kind of like, oh, you know, there's so many people that hate grouting. I don't think I'll be able to do this. and from the first time I did it, and then I cleaned it all off. I thought, wow, that is so awesome grouting. So we'll take that off. Put that in there. Now we want to wipe off as much as possible, but we're squeezing it, we're pushing it into the grout lines, especially in that centre one because they were quite large. If you look at my pieces, you'll know I usually use, I have my grout lines to be quite narrow. This is probably the first piece I've ever done that's had wide grout lines. I like to use fine grout lines, very narrow grout lines. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to let that sit for a while, about 5 minutes, maybe a bit longer until it starts hazing over, and then we'll come back and we'll clean it off and get it looking great, hopefully. Okay, we'll see you shortly. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes. You know, how long you leave it is going to be dependent on your temperature. But I don't like to leave it a really long time. I do have the air conditioner on in the studio, so because it is very cold outside, but then I don't want it really warm in here either. So all I'm going to do is get a very wrung out cloth, and I'm just going to wipe it across to get some of that bulky stuff off, the bulky thinset. We're just going to wipe it. Just rinse that out a bit more. And you can go in and use a dry rag as well, which is what I'll probably be doing as well, but I want to get off a bit of that bulky stuff that's on it. There you go. And never throw out your grout or your thinset until you're finished with it, you know, providing it's still good, because you really want to ensure that you've got some there in case you pull some out of the actual grout line. So I'm going in now with a dry rag. I'm just pulling it away from the grout lines, not with the grout line, we're trying to. There's a bit of thinset. Do the outside as well, want that nice and smooth. Right, I'm going to let that set for a little longer, and then we'll come back and do a thorough clean up on it. Okay, back shortly. Okay, this has been about 20 minutes, so we'll clean this right up now. So I'll get my rag, we'll polish it up. It's all coming up really nice. Table's wobbly and also squeaky, which is a bit of a pain. See how I just dug out that bit of thinset there? I'll need to replace that, and that's why I keep some. Okay, I'll fill that up, and then I'll do a final clean. And we'll come back and I'll show you what it looks like all nicely cleaned up. Well, there you go. It's come up really well. It wasn't difficult getting the thinset off, and this will go out in the garden tomorrow. And if you have any comments, put them down in the bottom of the comment section on the YouTube channel, and I hope you've taken something away from this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Enjoy.